Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I need to share what happened with my Aunt Karen, who tried to scam my sick mother out of her inheritance. This whole mess started because of our family cabin. Some background. In my country, inheritance laws are strict when it comes to property. If someone dies, their children must receive their fair share of any property before the surviving spouse can sell it. This becomes important later. My mom owned a third of a cabin with her two sisters. The oldest sister had passed away years ago, leaving her share to her children, my cousins. Karen, the youngest sister, was always the family's golden child. She married rich and was used to getting whatever she wanted. She spent almost every weekend at the cabin, while my mom rarely went there, though she always paid her share of maintenance costs. My mom was never good with money or paperwork. My dad handled everything until he passed away a few years ago, and then I took over helping her with all financial matters. She was too anxious to deal with it herself, and honestly, she never really understood the value of money. She was also battling cancer at the time, though it wasn't immediately life-threatening. One winter evening in 2006, Karen did something completely out of character. She stayed overnight at my mom's house. A few days later, I called my mom to check on her. When I asked how she was feeling, she said she was okay and mentioned Karen's visit. She then casually told me they had sorted out the cabin situation. When I asked what she meant by sorted out, my mom explained that Karen had brought some papers for her to sign because she was buying my mom's share. I asked if it was the deed, and my mom confirmed it was. She went on to tell me that when Karen asked about the price, my mom had suggested $3,000, thinking it seemed fair. The property was worth so much more than that. Karen had deliberately waited until she could get my mom alone, knowing full well that I would never let this happen. I immediately called Karen. I told her that what she did was completely unacceptable and that I would be contesting the sale. Karen dismissed my concerns, claiming that my mother had made her own decision and set the price herself. When I pointed out that she had taken advantage of someone who didn't understand property values, Karen just coldly said the papers were signed and there was nothing I could do about it. I hired a lawyer right away and Karen got one too. We spent months going back and forth. My mom was devastated by the family conflict. She repeatedly begged me to let it go, saying she didn't want the family fighting. But I had to explain to her that I couldn't let this go because it was her property and Karen had tried to steal it from her. Finally, in early 2007, we went to court. Karen walked in looking smug, probably thinking she'd already won. The judge took one look at the documentation and started asking questions. With each question, Karen's confidence crumbled. By the end, she was just staring at the floor as the judge declared the sale null and void. It was a clear violation of inheritance laws. The property was returned to my mom, but she passed away just a week after the trial. Karen didn't even show up to the funeral. After my mom died, I wanted to sell my share of the cabin, but I refused to sell it to Karen. Instead, I contacted my cousins who owned the other third. I explained that I wanted to sell them my share of the cabin, telling them that after what Karen did, I couldn't be involved with this property anymore. They were understanding and agreed to buy my share at market value. Karen barely uses the cabin anymore, apparently getting told no for the first time in her life, and failing to scam her dying sister left a bitter taste in her mouth. I heard she drives past it sometimes but never stops. I guess the reminder of her failed scheme is too much for her to handle. She tried to sell her share too, but nobody was interested in buying it. She's stuck with a constant reminder of how her greed cost her not just her relationship with family, but also the thing she wanted most. After 15 years of working in law enforcement, including the last 5 at Homeland Security, I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened during a simple shopping trip with my daughter. It was my first day off in 2 weeks, and I promised my 12-year-old we'd go shopping for her upcoming school dance. She'd been looking forward to it for months, and I wasn't going to let my hectic work schedule get in the way of this mother-daughter moment. We were at the local mall having just picked out a beautiful knee-length dress that my daughter absolutely loved. It was age-appropriate, comfortable, and made her feel confident. Everything a mother could hope for. We decided to stop by the shoe store next door to find matching shoes when it happened. I was helping my daughter try on a pair of sparkly flats when I felt someone tap aggressively on my shoulder. I turned around to find a woman probably in her 50s, wearing an expensive-looking outfit and sporting the most dramatic bob cut I'd ever seen. She demanded to know if I was a child's mother. When I confirmed that I was and asked if there was a problem, she launched into her tirade. She told me I should be ashamed of myself for letting my daughter dress like that in public. I looked at my daughter, who was wearing perfectly normal clothes, jeans, a t-shirt with a cartoon character, and a light jacket. When I told her I didn't see anything wrong with how my daughter was dressed, she grew even more agitated. She started criticizing the fit of my daughter's shirt, claiming it was too tight, and insisted the jeans were inappropriate for a young lady. She even brought up her grandchildren, bragging that she would never let them dress so provocatively. My daughter started shrinking into herself, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I felt my protective instincts kick in, but years of training helped me maintain my composure. I told her that my daughter was dressed perfectly appropriately for her age and asked her to leave us alone. This only seemed to enrage her more. She started yelling about how I was dismissing her when she was just trying to help me be a better parent. She insisted that someone needed to teach me proper values. By this point, other shoppers were starting to stare. My daughter was on the verge of tears. I tried one more time to end the confrontation, telling her the conversation was over and asking her to walk away. Instead of leaving, she stepped closer, jabbing her finger in my face. She started ranting about how I was what's wrong with society today, and how parents like me didn't know how to raise their children properly. I gave her one final warning to step back and leave us alone. She started to make some sort of threat, but before she could finish, she reached out and slapped me across the face, hard enough to make me stumble back a step. The store went dead silent. My daughter gasped. The Karen stood there with a triumphant look on her face, probably expecting me to break down crying or run away. Instead, I straightened up, pulled out my badge, and in the calm, authoritative voice I developed over years of dealing with dangerous situations, I identified myself as a federal agent with the Department of Homeland Security. I told her that she had just assaulted a federal officer and ordered her to put her hands behind her back. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. A security guard who had been watching the situation rushed over, and I asked him to call the local police. She started panicking, stammering that she didn't know who I was and that I couldn't arrest her because she was just trying to help. I explained to her that she had just committed a federal offense and that assaulting a federal agent was a serious crime, regardless of whether they were on duty or not. I pointed out that all of this happened because she couldn't mind her own business about a child's completely appropriate clothing. The local police arrived within minutes. After reviewing the store's security footage and taking statements from multiple witnesses, they took her into custody. My daughter, who had watched the whole thing unfold, finally spoke up after the Karen was led away in handcuffs. She said I was awesome but asked if we could finish shoe shopping first. After all the excitement, my girl was still focused on finding the perfect shoes for her dance. We did finish our shopping and I treated her to ice cream afterward. The incident led to the Karen facing serious charges, and she ended up with community service and mandatory anger management classes. I almost feel sorry for her, but there's something satisfying about knowing that her entitled behavior finally caught up with her in the most unexpected way possible. I spent 2 frustrating years in retail before securing a job at one of the country's top life insurance companies. The pay was decent, the benefits were great, and I saw it as a stepping stone to something better. Or so I told myself during the first month of training. My job mainly involved handling customer service calls, helping people with their policies, processing changes, and explaining benefits. Most calls were routine, some were sad, especially when dealing with death claims. But this particular call, this one still makes my blood boil whenever I think about it. It started like any other Tuesday morning. I had just finished my second cup of coffee when the call came in. The moment he spoke, I could picture him perfectly. Expensive suit, corner office, the type who probably had a nameplate on his desk that he polished daily. His first words made it clear what kind of call this would be. He told me to listen carefully because he would only say things once, then demanded information about changing beneficiaries on his life insurance policy. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I tried to maintain my professional demeanor and asked for his policy number. He spat out the numbers at me like rapid fire, then immediately launched into his demands. He asked 2 questions in quick succession: whether he could split the benefit between 2 people and if they had to be family members. When I confirmed that he could split the benefit and that beneficiaries didn't need to be family members, he practically shouted with satisfaction, saying I was the first person to give him a straight answer. Then came his next demand. He wanted the change of beneficiary form sent to his office, not his home. The way he emphasized not his home made my stomach turn. When I confirmed I could send it to his office address, he went on to explain that his wife was far too busy to deal with what he called menial business matters. But he wasn't done yet. Like a drill sergeant, he ordered me to repeat after him, making me say that I would send the form to his office address only. As if once wasn't enough, he made me repeat it again, demanding that I understand what I was saying. Throughout the entire call, his language was absolutely foul. Every other word seemed to be a curse word, and he kept berating me as if I was somehow personally responsible for all his life's problems. By the time the call ended, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. But here's the thing about life insurance policies. There's an automatic system that sends confirmation letters to the policyholder's home address whenever any changes are made to beneficiaries. These letters include all the details, names, amounts, everything. And there was absolutely nothing anyone could do to stop these letters from being sent. I sent the form to his office as requested and went about my day, trying to shake off the encounter. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me and I checked his policy details. Sure enough, he had changed the beneficiaries, split between his wife and someone else, whose name made it pretty clear she wasn't his sister. About a week after that change, there was another update. The policy was changed back to his wife being the sole beneficiary. I can only imagine the scene that played out when that confirmation letter arrived at his home. A month later, I got a call from his wife's lawyer. Turns out the confirmation letter was just the tip of the iceberg that sank his marriage. The other woman's name on the policy led his wife to dig deeper, and she found a whole trail of evidence. The wife got everything in the divorce, including, ironically, the corner office building where he had wanted me to send those forms. He had to move to a smaller city and take a job at a much smaller firm. I've spent over a decade working in retail, so I understand the service industry's challenges. I always tip well and try to be patient with staff even when they're having an off day. That's why what happened that night was so out of character for me. My brother-in-law had invited us to this fancy hotel bar. Not really my scene, but hey, a drink is a drink. I was standing at the bar waiting patiently to order when I noticed something that irritated me. The bartender's friend showed up, and he immediately let them cut in front of everyone. I'd been waiting there for a while, but I kept my cool. When the bartender finally made eye contact with me, I just gave him a casual shrug. Instead of acknowledging his poor service, the bartender just mockingly imitated my shrug back at me. When I finally got my drink, he practically threw my card back at me. Despite his attitude, years of working in retail made it impossible for me to leave no tip, so I left him 10%, way less than my usual 20%. My brother-in-law wasn't as forgiving. He left 0 tip when he ordered his round. I didn't think much of it at the time, but that decision would come back to haunt me later. About 20 minutes later, I needed to use the restroom. While I was washing my hands, the bartender suddenly appeared behind me, blocking the exit. He'd confused me with my brother-in-law and was ready for confrontation. He demanded to know why I hadn't left him a tip. I explained that he had me confused with someone else, telling him that despite his poor attitude all night, I had still left him a 10% tip. He rolled his eyes and left, but the story doesn't end there. When I walked out, my wife immediately noticed something was wrong. She asked me what had happened in there, mentioning that she'd seen him rush in right after me. I told her about the confrontation, and she was furious. My wife, being the protective force of nature she is, walked straight up to the bar. She confronted him about following me into the bathroom and told him that next time he should make sure he was stalking the right person. The bartender's response was to wave her off dismissively, roll his eyes, and turn his back on her. That was the final straw. When we got home, I did some research. I found the hotel's corporate structure and eventually tracked down the CEO's email address. I wrote the most professional complaint letter of my life, detailing everything that happened. I made sure to mention that while I wasn't the litigious type, others might take issue with being cornered in a bathroom over a misunderstanding about tips. The response was swift. The next day I got a call from the chief operating officer herself. She knew everyone's names, mine, my brother-in-law's, and the bartender's. She apologized profusely and promised to investigate. 2 days later, I received an email from the CEO and another call from the COO. They'd reviewed everything and offered us a $100 gift card as an apology. My wife and I used it for drinks and dinner at their restaurant, notably avoiding the bar, and that was that. But here's where it gets even better. 3 years later, I was at another bar in town chatting with the bartender who happened to be a family friend. When I mentioned where this incident took place, his face lit up with recognition. He excitedly told me that he used to work there and was amazed to discover I was the person from that infamous incident. He told me that the day after my complaint, they called the bartender into a meeting with his boss and the COO. They made him watch the security footage of everything, letting his friends cut the line, mocking my shrug, following me to the bathroom, and disrespecting my wife. The timing made it even better. Apparently, he'd just won Best Bartender in Santa Fe 2 weeks before this incident, which was probably why he wasn't fired. Instead, he went from being the golden boy to having the CEO personally disappointed in him. My family friend told me the bartender had later admitted he didn't know what he'd been thinking but still thought I was a jerk for reporting him. This guy had to keep working there, knowing that every corporate visit might be because of his behavior. His attitude apparently improved significantly after that, though I never went back to verify it myself. What makes this story even more satisfying is that I wasn't trying to get him fired. I just wanted accountability for his actions, and that's exactly what happened. He learned that being voted best bartender doesn't give you the right to treat customers like garbage or follow them into bathrooms for confrontations. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.